Charles Bronson steps into a hotel elevator after a long day of filming when three drunk construction workers follow him in, and the biggest one blocks the buttons, sneering, "Nowhere to hide now, movie boy. Time to see what you're really made of." What happens in the next 45 seconds between floors doesn't just teach these men a lesson. It creates a story that gets told in construction sites across America for the next 30 years. Chicago, Illinois, November 1974. Saturday night, 11:30 p.m. The Palmer House Hotel, 23rd floor. Charles Bronson walks down the carpeted hallway toward the elevator bank, exhausted from a 16-hour day shooting Hard Times. Still wearing his street clothes from the final scene, dark jeans, work boots, leather jacket. At 53 years old, he just wants to get to his room, call his wife Jill, and sleep. The elevator doors open with a soft ding. Empty car, mahogany panels, brass fixtures. The kind of elegant lift you'd expect in Chicago's finest hotel. Charles steps inside, presses 28 for his floor, leans against the back wall. 3 more floors, and he can finally rest. But as the doors begin to close, 3 men push through. Construction workers from the look of them, hard hats tucked under their arms, work clothes stained with concrete dust and sweat, steel-toed boots that have seen real labor. They're coming off a late shift, probably grabbing drinks at the hotel bar, loud and loose with alcohol and the camaraderie of men who work dangerous jobs together. The biggest one is Tommy Kowalski, 6'3", 250 pounds of muscle and beer gut, arms like oak trees from years of handling rebar and jackhammers. His face is flushed red from whiskey and attitude. Next to him stands Mike "Hammer" Sullivan, shorter but thick, with hands that look like they could crush concrete blocks. The third is Danny Rodriguez, wiry and quick, the kind of guy who talks tough to compensate for being the smallest in any group of hard men. They notice Charles immediately. That face is unmistakable, even under the dim elevator lighting. The weathered features, the intense eyes, the quiet presence that fills movie screens across America. But to these men, he represents everything they resent about modern society. Pretty boys making millions while real men break their backs for hourly wages. Well, Tommy says, his voice thick with alcohol and contempt. Look what we got here, boys. A genuine Hollywood tough guy. The elevator doors close with a quiet whoosh. The car begins its smooth ascent, 23rd floor, 24th, 24th. Charles doesn't respond, doesn't acknowledge the comment, just stands quietly against the back wall, watching the floor numbers climb. He's dealt with drunk men before. Usually, they talk themselves out. Usually, the elevator ride ends before things escalate. But Tommy isn't done. The confined space and captive audience fuel his confidence, make him feel like the star of his own show. "You hear me, movie star?" Tommy steps closer, using his size to crowd the small space. "I'm talking to you." Mike and Danny move to flank Charles, boxing him into the corner. 3 big men in a small space, alcohol making them bold, elevation making escape impossible. Charles looks up calmly, meets Tommy's bloodshot eyes with steady certainty. No fear, no anger, just acknowledgement that this moment was always going to happen. "I hear you," Charles says quietly. Tommy grins. The predatory grin of a man who thinks he's cornered prey. "Good. Because I want you to hear this real clear. You think you're tough because you play tough guys in movies. But this ain't Hollywood, movie boy. This is real life, and in real life, pretty boys get their asses kicked." 26th floor. 27th. The elevator continues its climb, but it feels like it's slowing down, like time itself is stretching. 3 drunk construction workers, each outweighing Charles by 30-50 pounds, surrounding him in an enclosed space with no exit. "You know what I think," Tommy continues, emboldened by his friend's presence and Charles's apparent passivity. "I think underneath all that movie tough guy bullshit, you're just another soft Hollywood fake, all makeup and stunt doubles." He reaches out with one massive hand, pokes Charles in the chest, hard. The kind of aggressive contact designed to provoke a reaction, to start a fight he thinks he can't lose. "So here's what's gonna happen," Tommy says. "You're gonna admit you're a fake. You're gonna tell us that all that tough guy shit is just acting. And maybe we let you walk out of this elevator with your pretty face intact." Danny laughs nervously. "Yeah, movie boy. Nowhere to hide now. Time to see what you're really made of." The elevator reaches the 28th floor. Charles' floor. But Tommy's hand shoots out, blocks the doors from opening, hits the emergency stop button. The elevator lurches to a halt between floors. The lights flicker once, then steady, complete silence, except for the hum of ventilation and the heavy breathing of four men in a space barely big enough for two. "Oops," Tommy says with mock concern. "Looks like we're stuck. Might be here a while. Just you, us, and all the time in the world to have our little conversation." Charles looks at each man slowly. Tommy, flushed with alcohol and aggression. Mike, cracking his knuckles like he's warming up for violence. Danny, smaller but mean. The kind who kicks when you're down. Then Charles does something that surprises all three of them. He smiles. Not a nervous smile. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that says he's been in worse situations with worse men, and walked away intact. "Gentlemen," Charles says. His voice so quiet they have to lean in to hear. "You think you have me trapped, but let me ask you something." The three workers exchange glances. This isn't how cornered men usually respond. "How many of you have been in a real fight?" Charles continues. "Not a bar scuffle, or construction site shoving match. A real fight, where someone was trying to kill you." Tommy's grin falters slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I mean," Charles says, "you're assuming I'm scared because I'm outnumbered in a small space, but you might want to consider that I'm not scared at all. And there's usually a reason when a man isn't scared in a situation that should scare him." Charles takes a step forward, not aggressive, just moving off the wall, giving himself room to operate. "You want to know what I'm really made of?" he asks. "I'm made of Pennsylvania coal country. Father dead in a mine when I was 10. Mother raising 11 kids alone. Poverty so deep that going hungry was normal, not unusual." The elevator car suddenly feels smaller. The air thicker. "I'm made of World War II, Charles continues, his voice never rising above a conversational tone. "B-29 tail gunner over the Pacific. Shot at by men who wanted to kill me. Men who were very good at killing. Men who weren't drunk. Men who weren't making mistakes." Tommy's hand drops from Charles's chest. Something in the actor's tone, his absolute calm, is making the big construction worker reconsider his assumptions. "I'm made of 15 years of small parts and rejection," Charles says. "Of being told I'm too ugly, too ethnic, too old, too foreign. Of grinding through bit parts while supporting a family, never knowing if the next job would come." Charles looks directly at Tommy. "You think this elevator scares me? You think 3 drunk construction workers scare me? I've been hungry, I've been shot at, I've been poor, I've been dismissed and underestimated my entire life. This," he gestures around the small space. "This is just Tuesday." The silence stretches. Mike stops cracking his knuckles. Danny's nervous laughter dies in his throat. "You want to fight me?" Charles asks. "Go ahead. But understand what you're starting. You're not fighting an actor. You're fighting someone who learned to survive when survival wasn't guaranteed. Someone who understands violence not as entertainment, but as reality." Charles takes another step forward. Now he's close enough to touch Tommy, close enough that the size difference doesn't matter as much. "And in this confined space," Charles says, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, "size doesn't help you. Experience does. Training does. Willingness to do whatever it takes to walk out alive does." He pauses, lets that sink in. "So ask yourselves, are you ready for whatever it takes? Because I learned a long time ago that in a real fight, the man who's willing to go furthest usually wins." Tommy stares into Charles's eyes, looking for fear, looking for weakness, finding only calm certainty, and something that might be pity. The kind of look a professional gives an amateur who doesn't understand what they're about to attempt. "Jesus," Tommy whispers. His aggression deflates like a punctured balloon. "You really mean it, don't you?" "I never say anything I don't mean," Charles replies simply. Mike clears his throat nervously. Look, man, we had some drinks. We were just talking. You were doing more than talking, Charles says. You were testing. That's fair. Men like you test strangers because it keeps you alive on dangerous job sites. But the test is over now. Charles reaches past Tommy, presses the button to restart the elevator. The car lurches into motion, continuing toward the 28th floor. Here's what's going to happen, Charles says, as the floor numbers climb. The doors are going to open. I'm going to get off. You're going to continue to whatever floor you're going to. And we're all going to pretend this conversation was about something else. The elevator dings. 28th floor. The doors slide open. Charles steps out, turns back to face the three men who now look smaller somehow, diminished by the realization of what they almost attempted. Gentlemen, he says, you work dangerous jobs. You risk your lives building things that matter. That's honorable work. Don't diminish yourselves by picking fights with strangers in elevators. He pauses in the doorway. And next time you want to test someone, make sure you're ready for the answer you might get. The doors close. Charles walks down the hallway to his room, keycard ready, thinking about calling Jill and getting some sleep. In the elevator, the three construction workers ride in silence to the lobby. Tommy's hands are shaking slightly. Not from fear exactly, but from the adrenaline dump that comes when you realize you almost made a potentially fatal mistake. What the hell just happened? Danny asks. We just learned something, Mike says quietly. We learned the difference between looking tough and being tough. Tommy nods slowly. That man was ready, really ready, for whatever was going to happen. They exit the elevator at the lobby, walk toward the bar for one more drink, but the mood has changed. The alcohol-fueled bravado has been replaced by something like respect. You know what scared me? Tommy says as they order whiskey. Not that he was gonna fight us, but that he was gonna win. The story spreads through Chicago's construction community, not as gossip or celebrity drama, but as education about recognizing real danger versus fake danger. Years later, when Tommy tells this story to younger workers, he uses it as a lesson about assumptions and respect. Real tough guys don't need to prove they're tough, he would say. They just are. And when you meet one, you know it. Something in their eyes, their voice, their complete lack of fear. Charles Bronson didn't need to hide because he'd never learned how. He'd learned to stand his ground instead. 45 seconds in an elevator in 1974. 45 seconds that taught three grown men the difference between movie tough and real tough. 45 seconds that proved sometimes the man who doesn't need to hide is the one you shouldn't corner. Charles Bronson didn't become dangerous when he became famous. He became famous because he'd always carried himself like a man who understood that real strength comes from surviving whatever life throws at you and still being willing to stand your ground when standing matters. That's what they learned in that elevator. Real courage isn't about not being scared, it's about being scared and standing anyway. And sometimes the man who's been scared enough times stops being scared altogether. He just starts being ready for whatever comes, wherever it comes, even in an elevator with nowhere to hide.